this solver later converted to volume. Then we will do some VolumeVop and volume combine to get that foamy structure we have on top, and you can see it here better. And also get this rocky Voronoi fracture type looking structure. We also want to have some direction to be able to create this vortex-like movement and basically guide the structure toward the camera. So that is also a goal. So we want it art directable. And on the other hand, we have this orange balls that are, even you can check their movement, you will see that they're basically representing the velocity vectors. So you can even see them coming into this vortex and rotating. Those are advected and directed by this speed. And you can see that this velocity vector is rotational and orbiting in this area. And it's also at the same time following a path. So these are the things we're gonna do today, and maybe some shading and post, but that's not really the goal here. So let's get into Houdini. Alright, now we're in Houdini, and you can see this geometry is looking very interesting. So let's jump into this, and we'll start with a geometry like most of the times and put a mountain sop in there. We do a subdivide on this subdivide. So what we want to do is we want to add speed on or velocity on each of these points, and we want to advect them in different direction. To do that, we have to, on one hand, scatter some point on this volume with points from volume. So with a point separation based on your setting, you will get a distribution of some points in here. So for example, right now there is 28,000 points scattered in this volume. And then on the other side, we have Voronoi fracture based on the scatter points, 12 points here, that we have on this Voronoi fracture. We now have basically separated it into small pieces. So that is one of the very useful and also famous nodes, which is Voronoi fracture, and this is how it's used. On one set of geometry stream, it will get the points that you want the fracture to happen, and on the other, it will receive the geometry that needs to be fractured. And then we continue from the Voronoi fracture output. We connect it to an assemble node. The reason for that is, you can see after we click on assemble node, we lose even the wireframe, which is now right now set on smooth wire shaded, so it must show it. But the reason it doesn't show it is that this is now a packed primitive. The reason we do that is now we have, for each piece, we have first an A point, and now we have a B point, which is basically a direction we want this thing to go. We can change the B point with an edit parameter, edit sub, and set it on the group you want to move, the group of primitives you want to move, and then later unpack them to take them to attribute VOP. So in the attribute VOP, now we will calculate the distance between these two pieces. So we have the first pieces, which is the A points of each piece, and we have the B pieces. So now we have to calculate the distance between each point and then calculate our velocity vector. And to do that, we will use a get attribute VOP, the input 1 and input 0 of this node attribute VOP. We can access them here in the geometry VOP global. And then you can say for every point, and then we take the position and we subtract it. So we basically take the position of the position attribute of the second pieces, the B points, and subtract it from the A point, which is the current position. And then you can multiply it by a constant or not, but right now this is disabled, so you can delete it. And by subtracting it and adding it to the v, which is the velocity vector, now we can access our velocity vector. And you can see it here. So you have to push here, and this needs to be active visualization to be able to see the vectors. You can even edit them here as well, how big they are. But basically, now you get the idea of like how we can make custom velocity vectors. So these were the B points, and now we are going into the direction of each of these pieces. You can see it here. So each point that is scattered here has the direction and velocity now calculated based on what we wanted. And then we add noise with pretty basic stuff. So we will take the position, add it to a turbulent noise, then add it to the velocity again, then output it to the velocity. This way we add a little bit of noise to this very uniform velocity vector we have. And then the points we had from the volume, they don't have the speed. Now we can transfer with an attribute transfer node the velocity vectors we created here to the points that are here. So now the points have the same velocity that we created here. Our points having the velocity, they need also a rest attribute. So we add a rest sub before going to our dot network. Alright, so we're here in our flip solver, and you can see that there is a red curve. This red curve is a pop curve force that later I will explain how it works and how it will direct the particles. But I want to show you how that velocity vector that we just created is now affecting our initial state, and now how the particles of the fluid are taking that as an initial velocity, taking that velocity vector. So I want to take you through the flip solver. So for the flip solver, the basic setup, you just need a flip solver, gravity node, and flip object, and pop source. But now I have two things more added, then I will explain what is those two things do. Now let's go through them one by one. So the flip object, in the guides and the particles, you have to set the visualizations to particles instead of other looks to get this look in your sim, to see them as particles, also interact with them as particles. And then you put the particle separation on a number depending on how much more resolution you want, and you can set this particle separation to lower number. So basically 0.01 would be higher resolution, which means lower particle separation, therefore more particles in volume. In the flip solver, you can set your substeps, put it at 1 and 2 at this situation, and you can set the time scale to slower motion or like at 1, which is the actual motion. You have reseeding. Reseeding is enabled, and this is the settings. Reseeding, it means basically it doesn't get let the liquid to get too thin, where there is no particle to introduce new particles. Yeah, that's it. And you can set limits for the boundaries of the volume of your simulation. So this is right now too big for this sim. It is better to set it right. So what is the source of your particles? Here, if you select the pop source, in the source, you can say where to get the geometry from, and it says use first context geometry. That means the first input to the dot network. So this is where it's getting liquid source, which is those points that we sampled in the volume, and it will emit on all those points, and it will inherit the render velocity. I think it's a multiply on the velocity vector. And then we go into another topic, which is the pop curve force. So after these points are emitted from the source, they will get affected by this curve force. This curve force is coming from this address, which is basically a curve that I created here. And you should be able to see it here. Yep, this is the curve. And this curve is basically now a tunnel that is pushing and orbiting our particles when they enter this corridor. And how this thing is happening is through these individual forces: follow scale, suction scale, which pushes them towards this curve, and also the orbit will orbit the particles around this curve. You can also add something called force along vector, which really helps in getting the particles going into this corridor. Set a value of 3 on the higher end of the graph for this attribute. And then that's it. Well, you can set a maximum influence rate, radius, and then you can also do other stuff with your basically curve force. You can make the end part of the curve thinner. But then we go into this pop VOP that I created here. And the reason I created this pop VOP is to get this black and white color gradient on top. So later I can transfer the color of these points to the geometry. So some information about the particles age, and how long they have been born, and this way I can have the contours highlighted, or have a better feeling of motion into the geometry by adding some colors, or use it for material later. So in order to get that, I added a pop VOP, and it's a very basic one. I'm dividing age by life, and then fitting it to this source min and source max, and then later fitting it between 0 to 1. So if you check the geometry spreadsheet, yeah, the particles have age, which is quite low number. Then they have life of 100, which is quite a high number. And so we have to fit this number between 0 and 1 to get that black and white value in the color. So in the dot network, we want to do that, but to do that, we need to fit a very low number to number, which I checked from the geometry spreadsheet. And then I fit that between 0 and 1. Then I get a good look here. That is black and white. That is based on the age of each particle. And then there is this node, which is a good helper, particle fluid surface. This will help you to transfer all these attributes and do some other posts on your particles, and maybe even directly convert them to surface VDBs or surface polygons. But for now, we just want them as points because we will use these set of points later for other uses. Now we can use a VDB from particles node, and this is very fun. So you can convert it to surface VDB, and now, or you can make it a fog VDB, which is a foggy volume now. So these are two different type of volumes. On some you can do some edits, on the other you can't. So I want to work with VolumeVop, that's why I'm converting it to a fog VDB. Then you can do a VDB smooth on it, and you can see it will become smoother. Then I can take that into a VolumeVop where I put my pattern on top. And this is also quite interesting topic. Let me just make this a little bit more clear. I can even turn these off so we are not distracted by even these to see what they actually do. So if I take this directly here, you will see that I have a cellular noise now added, and I can set a frequency and an offset, the border width, which is basically the width of the border of the tiles or the cell. Then I can add it or subtract it to the previous noise. And you can build other layers on top as well that are going to add and subtract more noises or different type of noises there. And you can use many noises from this menu and try your own. I really like to see you guys try some other noise, and please share it with me if you do. Convert it to a VDB polygon and then transfer the color attribute. Other attributes like I can show you source PTNum or on-curve force, which shows which part of the geometry right now is on curve. You can see the part that is in the curve force, the pop curve force, gets a different color and gets a different value of the attribute over there. And you can use this then later in your shading. And right now the whole look has changed as well because I changed. Anyway, let's move on. For the light globes, I used the same set of points we had there and the same dot network, and I just duplicated it. I just brought the number of particles and the pop source being born from all points to points, and the constant birth rate of 500. That way I made very low number of particles in comparison to the fluid. And then I randomized their p-scale attribute and added sphere, copied the sphere there. And you can see for the geometry that, well, the geometry after has this map that you can use for shading as well. To get that foam looking thing that is here, you can see the foam here, it is shaped, and then they are all merged here. You can see all the 3 layers together. So for the foam in between, what I did was I took the same VDB that we had up here, and just a moment, let me cancel the, yeah, took the first VDB we had here, and I took it before the VolumeVop where the tiled look was added. Also, I took the particles and made a new VDB out of them, a new VDB fog, and smoothed it again, but with a different value. And then combined it with the smoothed VDB from up here. Combining is basically Boolean operation on geometry. You can subtract, multiply, divide, or union, or intersect volumes. And you can also set different multipliers on each volume to basically get different looks, and or maybe you have different densities on these volumes, so you need to multiply one, so it really affects. And then converted it to polygon, and yeah, this is how the geometry is made. And just a quick look into the shading, I just simply for the sap material, I just took the color user data and added it to the diffuse channel, and that's it. And from here I selected the glass and just changed the values of reflection to a very low value and with a high roughness, and added a little bit of green sheen in there, and added lowered refraction from total 1 to 0.7, and unblinked the reflection, set the roughness to 1, and fiddled with the subsurface absorption scale, scatter scale, and phase. Added a little bit of subsurface scattering. Here added a little bit of amount of subsurface multiple scattering to get that also inside scatter look that was happening with the lights, because the lights can scatter and bounce in there. We have some subsurface scattering in there, it look pretty cool. You will have some bounces and interesting looks happening inside it. For the light balls, I did just a very simple material with emission set to 20 and with emission color red. That's it. And as you can see, this is quite basic. I didn't do quite extensive shading. And for the foam, I just chose Milky Coffee preset from Redshift. That's it. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and please let me know in the comments if you have any ideas for tutorials, or you want to see something, or you have any questions. To see your likes and also see you subscribe. That really motivates me to continue with these tutorials. Thank you very much for your attention, and hope to see you soon again.